welcome back to another reading from the Science of Mind magazine, The Daily Guides. As I mentioned before, this is courtesy of Creative Life Spiritual Center in Spring, Texas. And I am theoretically one of the ministers there. Theoretically, or I am, I guess. So, just trying to straighten this up. Well, yesterday I was reading from the physical edition, the book that comes in the mail, or the magazine that comes in the mail. And Reverend Jesse got a hold of the publisher, and she sent a digital copy to him. It didn't get here by 5 o'clock yesterday, but it did get here. And therefore, when I did my pre-reading, I was able to read the digital version. Guess what? When I came to my computer, the digital version is now available online, which means I could pull it up and I can read from it. Just thought I would update you on that. This is a continuation of yesterday's reading, Be Bold in Your Practice, Part 2. So before I comment, let's see what Reverend Raymond Anderson has got to say about this. Reverend Dr. Raymond Anderson, because he isn't just an honorary doctor, he is a PhD. Be Bold in Your Practice, Part 2. First quote is from someone you've all heard of, really. I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. And that was none other than Bruce Lee. And there was an article about him on the television in the past week, which was really kind of interesting. And of course, ironic that he comes up here. And the next quote is always from Ernest Holmes. And this is no different. It's from Love and Law, which is actually quite a well-known book. And it's on page 54, paragraph 2, Love and Law. And he gives us some practical advice. He says, you have to practice these things. Take a few moments each day in silence and in the recognition of infinite life. Affirm 1. It is in me now. I can use it. My word goes forth into mind. It takes my word and creates it. I see in my life the thing which it has created. And as I said, that's from Ernest Holmes' Love and Law, page 54, paragraph 2. I'll come back to this. For those of you who are not really familiar with Science of Mind and New Thought, I'll come back to it. And this is Reverend Raymond Anderson speaking. He says, yesterday's guide included a quote from Toni Morrison that referenced practicing God or practicing the divine, for those of you who don't like the God word. How did that land with you? What did it stir within you? Today we expand on that idea with the premise that spirit is the expression of your life, that you are an individualized expression and incarnation of spirit itself. And then the breadth and height of how you live your life is the practice of living your divine magnificence. More about practice here. A pianist practices playing the piano. The chef, the art of cooking. A dancer, the art of dance. And each of us lives, moves, and has our being as the very expression of the capitalized one life. Suppose we remix the above-mentioned Bruce Lee quote to read, quote, I respect and honor the person who has practiced one affirmation into manifestation more than the person who has practiced 10,000 affirmations with no manifestations. What is the impact of this remix as it relates to our lives? If asked, many of us could list a series of spiritual practices. Being bold in our practice is the invitation to practice living our lives as spiritual practice. Next point is really important. Spirit being all there is. It is right there when we wash the dishes, do the laundry, shop for groceries, and watch television. What does that mean? What does it look like to know that when you do these things boldly and with the awareness that they are spiritual practices, just as much as meditating, praying, and journaling are spiritual practices? What does it mean to you? Well, there was a famous monk. He wasn't a priest, actually. He was a monk. He was called Brother... I've forgotten his name. I think it was... I want to say Brother Anthony. I'm not sure if that's actually is correct. Anyway, he is famous as saying that he was as much present with the divine as when he was in the kitchen cooking and washing dishes as he was when he was in the church in the sanctuary doing some form of worship. So it's exactly the same idea. In other words, we saw it the other day that the mundane, the sacred and the profane, there really is no separation. You know, theoretically, we have this image of separation of church and state, and that kind of translates itself in Western culture into a separation of spiritual, aka religious practices, and everyday stuff. But in a lot of cultures, that doesn't exist. That separation just doesn't exist. It's not there. And that everything is practicing being an expression of one source. However you look at that, you know, something gave birth to this whole universe, and maybe the multiverse, not the multiverse sense of Marvel, but in the multiverse sense that there are many universes, probably each with different ways of being in the physical realm. You know, gravity works this way in one universe. Maybe it doesn't work the same way in another universe. Cause and effect. Who knows how that works? But the bottom line is that we are all interconnected, if you want to look at it that way. If you want to look at it in a less spiritual sense, just think that we are all interconnected. And we all see examples of this. I mention it time and again about coincidences. Some people call them God incidences, but I call them coincidences that really aren't coincidences, that we are totally connected. And the one that I've quoted a lot, and it still sticks in my mind, is when I was in the kitchen and my grandson, this is several years ago, said to me, when I was thinking about wormholes, because I'm a science fiction, science fantasy nerd, and I've always been into that stuff. And when he said to me, and I was thinking it, not saying it out loud, when he said, "Opa, Grandpa, what is a wormhole?" And I don't recall saying it out loud or even whispering it. I was just thinking it. And as I said, oftentimes I'm doing wordscapes and I fill in a word just as somebody on the TV is speaking it. So there is this interconnection, if you want to look at it that way. If you want to look at the way in the quantum field, you know, that in order to express in this universe from the quantum into reality, you know, the quantum collapse says that when a consciousness is focused on something that's in the quantum field, that probability, that waveform changes into a particle and becomes part of the living universe. It's really no different than what Ernest Holmes was saying here. And I'm going to go back to the Holmes quote. I said I would, and I will. And Holmes is saying you have to practice these things. One of the basics of New Thought, and lots of philosophies around the world, and probably in the universe, because I don't think life is limited to this one planet. It doesn't make sense. in a universe that's got billions and billions and billions, either in the European sense, which is 10 to the 12, or the American sense, which is 10 to the 9. That's a 10 followed by 9 zeros, or a 10 followed by 15. Sorry, a 10 followed by 9 zeros, or a 10 followed by 12 zeros. It really doesn't matter. It doesn't make sense that there isn't this interconnectedness. And what Holmes is saying is that the power that runs through the whole universe is available for us to use right here and right now. Whatever you want to call that power. And people call it by different things. But it's running through us and we can use it. And we affirm that that's happening right now, he says. And we can use it. It goes through my mind. How does it go through my mind? It goes through my mind as thoughts. And it goes through my mind as feelings. And when I focus those thoughts and feelings long enough and strongly enough, then I impact whatever is in that universal mind, and it begins to create in this physical universe, which is, as I said, really no different than quantum collapse in the quantum field. And that's what Holmes is saying. It's in me now. I can use it. My word goes forth into mind. It takes my word and creates it. I see in my life the things which it has created. In other words, I'm using power. I am not the creator of that power. I'm simply using it. So I don't know if this makes sense to you. His affirmation, and use the word prayer in whatever sense comes to you. He says, prayer is not simply something I say. Prayer is how I wash my face, eat my meal, and move throughout the day. Change it. Personally, I wouldn't use the first part. Prayer is not something I say. Simply something I say. I would simply say, prayer is how I wash my face, eat a meal, and move throughout the day. Mindfulness is how I wash my face, eat a meal, and move throughout the day. Remember Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist monk who was kind of the father of mindfulness, who's promoted mindfulness. And he would say things such as, when you clean your teeth, clean your teeth. When you wash your hands, wash your hands. When you wash your face, etc., etc. So that's really what Reverend Raymond is saying here. He's saying that everything that we do in life is meaningful, and it's our job to do it in mind, in mindfulness. And then when we do it in mindfulness, it's all one. You can call it prayer, you can call it mindfulness, you can call it concentration, you can call it being in the moment. It doesn't really matter. That's what it is. So I hope this recording works out fine. I got a message the other day that it stopped. On some systems it stopped. On the one I checked on, it didn't stop. It went all the way through. But then again, technology is kind of wacky, and you never know what you're going to get until you see the end result. So Reverend Lisa will be on tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock reading from the Science of Mind textbook. I will be back tomorrow somewhere around about 5 o'clock. And if I went on too long today, I apologize. I'm an engineer. I believe in Occam's razor. The simplest solution is the best. And I do try and keep things to a minimum. Oh, maybe it's time to tell a little joke. And some of you have heard it before. There was a mother and daughter in church. And the preacher had a reputation for speaking extremely long. And he'd been speaking quite a long time. And then finally he said, and in conclusion, and the little girl had never heard the word in conclusion, or the words in conclusion before. And she turned to her mother and said, Mother, what does in conclusion mean? And the mother said, when the preacher says it, absolutely nothing. So until next time, take care of yourselves. Namaste.